Emma, how could you humiliate us like this? My dad roared, his voice echoing throughout the kitchen. He was standing at the table's head, his expression filled with both disappointment and anger. Eliza was just leaning against the counter in a relaxed way, arms crossed, watching everything happen with a tight-lipped expression. There I was, in shock, my heart hammering in my chest, overwhelmed by their disapproval. I'm Emma Morgan. Tonight, at 26 years old, everything I know is falling apart. My only living parent, my father, stared at me as if he didn't know me at all. Eliza, my twin, the one who always seemed to win, didn't even attempt to stick up for me. And now, being blamed for something I had no involvement in, I understood I had no one. The trouble began when legal notices started arriving at my dad's house, each one more unsettling than the previous. According to these papers, I had supposedly failed to pay back several debts, accounts that I had no recollection of ever establishing. I had gotten some strange phone calls in recent weeks about debts I allegedly needed to pay back. I brushed them off, thinking they were just scam calls, but the accusations were legitimate, and the impact of these legal threats hung over me like a dark cloud. It was at this point when things truly disintegrated. I didn't do any of this, Dad, I insisted, my voice unsteady but resolute. I have no clue how this occurred, but it wasn't me. Eliza moved slightly, and when she spoke her eyes shone with a strange light. Seriously, Emma, are you still trying to claim you didn't do it? She questioned, her voice dripping with what seemed like sympathy. Your name is on all the paperwork, everyone knows that, she added. Can't you simply be honest and stop prolonging this ordeal? The look on my father's face turned stern as he glanced in my direction. So what if it did happen? Are you telling me that all of this is just pure happenstance? The borrowings, the grievances, the claims made by individuals from those locations? What reason would they have to single you out without any provocation? I struggled to keep my voice from shaking as I forced myself to swallow. Because I was set up, Dad. Someone used my identity. I have no idea how they did it, but I promise you that I am innocent of all these charges. My gaze jumped to Eliza, and she lifted her hands as if pretending to give up. Set up, is that for real? Eliza uttered, her voice thick with skepticism. Who would put in so much effort, Emma, and why would they target you specifically? This comes across more as a flimsy justification than anything truthful. As he began to walk back and forth, Dad shook his head. Emma, I've made a point to be understanding with you, but this is simply going too far. You've grown up now. It's time for you to own up to what you've done. Until you can face what you've done, you're not allowed to stay here. Those words felt like a physical blow, and it felt as if the world beneath my feet was moving. Dad, are you really throwing me out? I barely managed to whisper. I just stood immobile as the impact of my father's words began to register. With a theatrical sigh, Eliza shook her head. It pains me to witness this, yet perhaps a period of separation will be beneficial for your introspection, Emma, she stated, her tone artificially sweet with insincere worry. I stared at her, my throat closing up with a mixture of fury and disbelief. You're really enjoying all this, aren't you? I spoke softly. You've always been the golden child, and now you get to watch me get blamed for something I had nothing to do with. Eliza's not the issue we're dealing with, Dad barked, addressing Emma. You are the one causing trouble, don't complicate things further. Get your belongings together and go tonight. The decisiveness in his voice meant there was no point in arguing. Turning away, I felt a sharp pain in my chest, fighting back tears, understanding that whatever I might say would fall on deaf ears. Quietly, I filled my suitcases, each possession a harsh reminder of the world I was abandoning. The walls of the room where I grew up seemed unfamiliar now, almost as if they were someone else's, a past version of myself that was gone. Eliza stood leaning against the doorframe in a relaxed way, her expression difficult to interpret. If only things could be different, she said quietly, her voice filled with sympathy that came across as disingenuous. With my back turned to her, I continued to cram clothing into my duffel bag. Yeah, I wish so too, I mumbled, my voice weighed down by despair. It's just things are looking really terrible for you right now, Emma. Maybe having some space to yourself will help you get a grip on how all of this transpired, she went on. For a split second I stopped moving, my hand clenched tightly on the dresser's edge. I had nothing to do with this, I declared softly. I don't understand how this is even happening or why, but I'm innocent. Eliza sighed, retreating out into the hallway. I hope you can sort all of this out, if only for your own good. I truly do. Her statement resonated in my thoughts as I closed my bag and left the room, unable to shake the unsettling sensation that something wasn't quite right. So for the moment, there was nothing else for me to do except to go. Stepping out, the night felt freezing and biting, with my bag hanging from my shoulder. The house that I left behind, once a source of comfort and happy times, now seemed like a dark form filled with blame and lies. I stopped near the road, looking back at the window where a dim light still shone. My father didn't even bother to come out to say goodbye. He'd made up his mind and apparently had no desire to look back. I could still hear Eliza's voice in my mind. "I hope you can sort this out for your own good." Her words rang empty, but they stuck with me like a sharp pain. How did everything get so messed up? Why was I being blamed for everything when I hadn't done a thing? As I headed down the street, gripping the strap of my bag, I made a promise to myself. I may not know the answers right now, but I won't quit until I do. Something wasn't right, and I intended to get to the bottom of it, even if nobody else believed me. The bus depot was practically deserted when I got there, with the buzzing lights making long, dark shapes on the floor. Purchasing a ticket to the closest big city, my hands shook a little as I gave the money to the person behind the counter. The clerk didn't even look up, just pushed the ticket across without saying anything. I settled into a seat over in the corner, trying to stay away from the few other people waiting around. As I looked at the ticket, now all crumpled up in my hand, the weight of everything started to hit me. I was all by myself now, without a place to call home, without any family to count on. A flurry of unanswerable questions churned in my head. How could things have crumbled so fast? What kind of person would go so far to set me up? And what was their reason? The sound of a bus engine grew louder as it neared, breaking me out of my reverie. I gripped my bag more firmly and rose to my feet as the bus came to a halt. This wasn't the future I had imagined, but it was the reality I had to confront now, little by little. The initial days after departing from my house passed in a haze of inexpensive motel rooms, quick meals, and uneasy nights. I was barely managing to stay afloat, my thoughts consumed by everything I had forfeited. However, just lying around feeling sorry for myself wasn't a solution to my problems. I needed to make it through this, which required me to secure employment, no matter what it was. I managed to get hired at a small apparel shop located in the city's center. It wasn't a fancy gig, but it gave me something to occupy my time and earn a salary. My colleague Mia was somewhat older than I was, sporting vivid red hair and a practical manner. She didn't intrude, but somehow she got me to share things without me even noticing. One quiet afternoon, while we were folding shirts close to the cash register, I began to reveal details about what had transpired. "It's been like living in a bad dream," I confessed, placing a stack of sweaters down. "I don't even understand how I got implicated. I've never been involved in anything like this before." Mia stopped for a moment, resting on the counter. "That's a terrible situation," she remarked, looking concerned. "So you mentioned loans and some kind of scam, is that right? Has it ever crossed your mind that perhaps someone impersonating you might be responsible?" I paused what I was doing, her statement startling me. "Someone pretending to be me?" I echoed, the notion strange yet somehow believable. "I mean, I suppose it's a possibility, but who would actually bother going through with something like that?" She just lifted her shoulders, cocking her head to the side. "I couldn't say. Is there anyone who resembles you enough to actually get away with it?" Her inquiry lingered, filled with hidden meaning. For a second, I was speechless. My thoughts drifted to the single individual who matched that description without question. Eliza, but no way. What reason would she have to do something like that? Even so, a tiny bit of suspicion had taken root, and I couldn't ignore it. I stalled, my fingers still positioned halfway through folding. "There is my twin," I revealed hesitantly. The words felt peculiar as I spoke them. "We look exactly alike. Eliza. But I just can't believe she would ever do something like this. Everyone adores her." Mia arched an eyebrow, resting her forearms on the countertop. "A twin, an identical one? Emma, seriously, if someone is managing to accomplish this, they'd have to look exactly the same as you. And you expect me to believe your twin is completely blameless?" I moved my head from side to side, the thought making me queasy. She's always been the golden child. My father has unwavering faith in her. Everyone does. There's absolutely no chance she'd endanger all of that for something like this. Beyond all that, what reason would she have to set me up? Mia chuckled briefly, but it wasn't a real, amused kind of sound. "I couldn't say for sure, maybe envy? pure maliciousness. It's astonishing what lengths individuals will go to if they're convinced they'll get away with it. After all, who could copy your identity better than someone with your exact appearance? Her statement made me feel unsettled and also introduced an irritating suspicion into my thoughts. I resisted the urge to accept this as true. I simply couldn't accept it. However, the details began to connect in a way that was impossible to dismiss. What if the individual I placed my highest confidence in had been the instigator from the beginning? That evening, I couldn't sleep in my small living space, just gazing at the imperfections in the plaster above me. Mia's commentary lingered in my thoughts, stubbornly preventing me from finding peace. No one could imitate you better than someone who is your double. Eliza was always the focus of everyone's gaze, someone who could smooth talk her way out of any challenging situation. And what about me? I was the reserved one, the susceptible victim. But could she actually commit something so heartless? I picked up my phone and began to look through outdated pictures. In the images, there we were, Eliza and I, next to each other, looking like almost exact replicas. I recalled how she previously made lighthearted comments about how straightforward it would be to fool others. In earlier times, it came across as innocent, just her being lighthearted. But at this point, it seemed those lighthearted remarks were concealing something more sinister. As reluctant as I was to acknowledge it, a portion of my thoughts couldn't dismiss the prospect. In the event that it was Eliza, she put in significant effort to ensure that I received the blame. Should that be the reality, I needed validation. I couldn't face her, or really anyone, without having some solid proof in my hand. At this point, it wasn't simply about proving my innocence. It was now about unearthing the complete story, regardless of how painful the revelation might be. I came to a conclusion the following day. I decided that I wouldn't reach out to my father or Eliza, at least not yet. If there was even the slightest possibility that Mia was telling the truth, confronting them without any real evidence would just complicate the situation further. My plan was to concentrate on getting to the bottom of everything. At the office, I told Mia that I was interested in investigating, even though I wasn't sure what her response would be. Much to my surprise, she smiled broadly and enthusiastically put her hands together. Honestly, I was starting to wonder if you were ever going to decide to stand up for yourself. Allow me to assist you, she told me, her eagerness taking me by surprise. You don't need to get yourself tangled up in this, I responded, anxiously fidgeting with a coat hanger in my grasp. Don't be silly, I thrive on this kind of drama, Mia responded with a playful wink. After all, it's always better to have two people working on something, isn't it? So let's begin with the fundamentals. Where exactly did these allegations of fraud originate? Do you have any documents or specifics that we can look at? I acknowledged this by nodding and reaching into my bag for a file. I had been careful enough to save duplicates of the letters that were delivered to my dad's house. Mia went through them quickly, squinting as she turned each page. The majority of these seemed to be connected to specific loans and accounts, she stated, pointing to the documents with her finger. We ought to investigate where these accounts were initially established. Perhaps there's some kind of route we can trace back. I experienced a small feeling of optimism for the first time in several weeks. Seeing Mia's resolve really bolstered me, and jointly we set about trying to make sense of this confusing situation. Assuming Eliza, or anyone else for that matter, was responsible, we were going to uncover the truth, no matter what it took. The whole thing kicked off when official court documents started showing up at my dad's place, and each one was more concerning than the previous. The documents alleged that I had failed to pay back several loans, which were supposedly connected to accounts I didn't even remember creating. The charges were legitimate, and I felt like I was living under the threat of a lawsuit. Mia and I dedicated ourselves to this investigation for what felt like days on end. We'd get together at her small kitchen table during our lunch breaks and again after work, going through all the documents and attempting to trace the accounts. She really had an eye for the small stuff, finding things that I had totally missed, like minor differences in the penmanship and the specific branches that opened the accounts. Check this out, she told me one afternoon, pushing a paper in my direction. The signature right here is just a little different from yours. They're alike, but they're not the same. And all of these accounts, I asked, they were all set up in the next city. I just stared at the document and my heart began to race. Eliza was living in that city a few years back. She claimed it was for a volunteer project, I responded. I faltered a little, my voice wavering. Do you actually think? Mia sat back in her seat and her face turned serious. It's really starting to appear that someone was using your personal information while they lived there, she said. And considering she was the one residing in that city, it might mean something. She didn't finish the sentence, but the meaning was definitely there. It was so heavy I had to take a second. I'm trying not to jump to conclusions, but it increasingly seems like everything points back to her. Mia acknowledged my statement. We're going to require more information. Assuming she's actually responsible for this, there's bound to be a more extensive trail. Let's investigate if there are any purchases or documentation connected with these accounts. Her assurance instilled the courage within me that I needed. I wasn't quite prepared to directly accuse Eliza, though the puzzle pieces were beginning to align. I could sense it. We were moving nearer to uncovering what actually occurred. The initial location we were investigating was a local credit union located on the outskirts of the city. Mia and I went inside. There was a subtle aroma of paper and old coffee. A young woman working at the counter looked up and grinned. I stopped dead in my tracks. What was that about? The woman's smile briefly weakened, but she quickly regained her composure. Oh, my bad, I thought you had been here previously. You just look very recognizable. Mia gave me a fleeting glance, but remained silent. I plastered on a smile and walked toward the counter. Actually, I'm inquiring regarding a loan that was started utilizing my name. I'm attempting to grasp the particulars. The woman gave a nod, entering information on her computer. Her brow furrowed slightly as she reviewed the screen. Indeed, I see the account. It was established 2 years back. You supplied the paperwork in person, so we simply need to confirm some details. Did you say in person? I asked again, with my voice trembling. Yes, she said slowly, her eyes moving back and forth from me to the monitor. You presented identification and signed the documents right here at the branch. She paused, then mentioned it happened on a peaceful afternoon. I recall this distinctly because we had a quick conversation about how unusually mild the weather was for that season. Mia was leaning in a relaxed way against the counter, her face composed, yet her gaze intense. Could you possibly retrieve a version of those files for us? We want to go over them with careful attention. The worker seemed uncertain. Though I'm not permitted to give them to you directly, I can present the digital copies that are in the system. She angled the screen a little and then I saw it plainly. My name, my endorsement, and a photo claiming to be me, though in reality it wasn't my face. Or at least not precisely. Mia moved nearer, her voice barely audible. Emma, that person is your sibling, isn't she? My heart sank. The visage on the screen appeared to be exactly like mine, however there were subtle differences that I couldn't refute. It was definitely Eliza. As the reality that I'd been pushing away materialized before me, my hands shook. We went to a couple more places that day, and each interaction played out in almost the same unsettling fashion. Every time we went to a bank or lending institution, the people there gave the impression that they were acquainted with me, acting as if they knew me well or talking about events that had never occurred. At one office, a man of middle age sitting behind the desk even gave a soft laugh. You're here again? I wasn't expecting to see you again so quickly, he remarked while sorting through documents on his workspace. I managed a civil smile, although my gut was in knots. The truth is, I'm investigating some inconsistencies involving an account established using my name, I explained tactfully. His grin diminished a little and his eyes met mine. Are you suggesting something's not right? But you handed over all the paperwork personally during your visit last month. Mia edged closer, her voice relaxed but unwavering. Was any identification used? Perhaps you might still have a copy in your records? The man knitted his brow but agreed. Sure, give me a moment to find the account. Once the papers showed up on his computer screen, my spirits plummeted. The image staring back at me from the ID was undeniable. Eliza's face, but with my name attached. A wave of nausea washed over me as the truth slammed into me hard. It had been Eliza from the get-go. Her face on the identification, her signature on the official forms, her self-assured manner while pulling off the schemes, it was all her. My sibling, the person I shared DNA with, had capitalized on our identical appearances to pilfer my identity and leave me to deal with the consequences. I gazed at the monitor, completely stunned, my breathing becoming restricted by a blend of resentment and anger. Mia put a calming hand on my arm, her face reflecting a mixture of understanding and hushed outrage. She has been playing you the entire time, Mia whispered gently, her words slicing through the quietness with precision. I felt an overwhelming urge to yell, to weep, to rush out and make Eliza give me answers. But all I was capable of was just sitting there, unmoving, as the enormity of her actions overwhelmed me. My own sister had tricked me, and my dad had trusted her implicitly. As I walked away from my workplace, my thoughts were a whirlwind, finally connecting all the dots I'd chosen to overlook for the last 12 months. Eliza's overnight passion for luxury clothes, the fancy purses, the custom-made jackets, the pricey gems she'd shown off at holiday gatherings. I recall asking her once how she could manage to buy all that stuff, and she just brushed it off with a laugh, claiming it was simply a little reward for herself. I think she mentioned that she'd been putting money away for a while. Back then, I took her at her word. Why wouldn't I have? She was always the one who seemed to have it all under control. However, those recollections now felt threatening, the evasive way she'd respond to direct questions, the over-the-top purchases that clearly didn't align with her average income, that self-satisfied expression she'd wear every time I expressed doubt about her apparent financial gains. It clicked. She hadn't actually been saving up. Instead, she'd been taking advantage of my good name to support her extravagant tastes, leaving me to deal with the fallout. The following day, I had a meeting with an attorney by the name of David Cole, a composed, middle-aged guy whose intense stare suggested that he understood more than I was saying. His workspace was unpretentious but well-organized, with paperwork stacked precisely on his work surface and the subtle aroma of brewed coffee floating around. I explained that I'd received official notice that I'd failed to make payments on several loans, managing to keep my voice even despite the anxiety swirling inside me. I wasn't planning for any of this, but I need to figure out what the legal repercussions are, whether I pay or don't pay. David reclined in his seat, folding his hands together. Paying those defaulted loans off won't wipe away the fact that I defaulted, even though it may stop any further legal actions, like being sued or having my paychecks garnished. Even so, my credit report will still reflect those past defaults unless the lenders consent to take them off, but there's no guarantee they will. I acknowledged his points, trying to absorb it all. What if I can't pay them, though? That, he told me, is a whole different situation. The lenders might then take me to court to try and get their money back. If they're successful in court, they can go after me with judgments, potentially taking my stuff or taking money directly out of my paycheck. Also, it could negatively affect my chances of getting credit or loans down the road. His explanation made sense, but it gave me a really uneasy feeling. Would paying these loans off at least help my reputation, even if the defaults still show up? David paused and seemed to really think about it. It could demonstrate that I'm making an effort to take accountability and settle things. However, completely clearing my name would depend on figuring out how those loans originated in the first place. If there's even a hint of identity theft or any fraudulent activity, that would have to be investigated thoroughly. I agreed, but I could feel my heart racing. I wasn't prepared to talk about Eliza or the possibility of fraud just yet. Right now, all I could do was zero in on the available options and how much more dire things could become if I stayed still. I paused briefly before finally talking. Say, just for the sake of argument, someone nabbed my personal info and used it to take out these loans. Would that make a difference in anything? If someone stole your identity, that's a pretty big deal. While you wouldn't be held accountable for those debts under the law, you'd still have to come up with proof that you weren't the one who applied for them. Usually, that involves making a report to the police, informing the lending institutions, and challenging the charges with the credit reporting agencies. He answered that it would make things a whole lot harder. The responsibility falls on your shoulders to demonstrate that you didn't create those accounts. Without that, lenders will keep seeing you as the person on the hook. I understood, his words feeling like a load on me. David said that it wouldn't completely do that. It would halt any legal actions targeting you for not paying, but the record of the loans and the belief that you were the one who opened them would still be there unless you can prove otherwise. If there's even a sliver of a possibility that someone else is involved, you need to start looking into it immediately. The more time that passes, the more difficult gathering proof will become. I gave another nod, my thoughts churning. His counsel rang true, but it also implied I could no longer delay confronting reality. David's face became a little kinder as he moved closer, his voice remaining calm. Provided you can demonstrate that your identity was taken and you didn't take out those loans, you won't be responsible for the payments. The creditors will then have to shut down the bogus accounts and cease their attempts to collect from you. Furthermore, your credit history can be updated to take off the bad marks linked to those accounts. A brief feeling of hope sparked within me before another question popped into my head. And what will happen to the individual who stole my identity? That's conditional, David stated, his voice unwavering. If you give proof of the identity theft, it turns into a criminal issue. The police might get involved, and the culprit could be charged with offenses like fraud, forgery, and other related crimes. Depending on how serious things are, consequences could range from monetary penalties to paying back the lenders or even time in prison. I took a deep breath. So, if I present valid proof, I'll be in the clear. But the person responsible for all of this, they might experience serious repercussions. Absolutely, he replied, locking eyes with me. But getting your name cleared is what's most important right now. I understand it might feel difficult if a person close to you is the one responsible. However, bear in mind that this extends beyond mere financial matters. It's really about obtaining fairness and shielding yourself from any additional suffering. I gave a deliberate nod. His sentiments felt like a burden in my soul. In that situation, a selection would be needed from me. Would I shield the person who had deceived me, or at last, would I stand up for what's honestly mine? The choice placed a significant strain on my thoughts, though I was aware that I could no longer escape facing the facts. Eliza needed to be held responsible for her actions. It wasn't only about me, but also the family she had so effortlessly misled. I refused to allow her deeds to wreck my future, yet the prospect of her imprisonment twisted my insides. It was at that point when the concept started to take shape within my thoughts. I intended to confront her, but under my own regulations. In the past, my relatives would host a substantial get-together annually. At our yearly family meeting, with everyone in attendance, I planned to display the evidence of her actions. My wish was for her to truly grasp the magnitude of her deception, to observe the letdown evident in our father's gaze, and to face accountability for the harm she had inflicted upon me. Nevertheless, I wasn't planning on handing her over to law enforcement, not unless she consented to amend things. Eliza would be required to take care of the debts that she had fraudulently obtained using my identity. She would need to repair this damage and assume responsibility discreetly, without subjecting me to additional public shame or courtroom dramas. This resolution would allow me to have the fairness that I was owed, while saving her from the most severe repercussions. The family gathering was drawing near. It was only 7 days away. It allowed me only enough time to collect all that was necessary, each paper, every bit of proof, all the information that would make it impossible for her to dispute her actions. Eliza wouldn't be able to charm her way out of this situation this time. She was going to have to confront reality, and so would all the others. The period before the get-together passed by in a haze. I dedicated every bit of free time to carefully reviewing all the proof I had obtained, images of the falsified papers, the financial records, and also the recordings of bank staff members who had unknowingly verified what Eliza did. Each item fell perfectly into place, like sections of a complete picture, forming an indisputable argument against her. Through the entire process, Mia was right there supporting me, and her unending enthusiasm prevented me from getting sidetracked anytime the strain of it all was on the verge of becoming overwhelming. "You're capable of handling this, Emma," she assured me as I put the documents into a well-organized file the evening before we met. "Just adhere to the outline. Don't permit her to reverse everything against you." I gave my head a nod, and my fingers shook a bit as I closed the folder. "She has been manipulating situations like this for so long, Mia. Imagine that no one will have faith in my statement. What if Father chooses to agree with her once more?" Mia then placed a comforting hand over my arm. "This time, not only are you verbalizing what you know to be real, but you're also proving it. It's impossible for people to challenge the truth, Emma. You've done absolutely everything that could be done. Now you need to just let the real story speak on its own." I carried her words with me into the evening while trying to sleep, and my nerves got all tangled up with expectation. The next day was going to be a turning point, no matter what. The instant I crossed the threshold, I felt an icy reception, like a physical blow. All talking just stopped, people turned to look, and I could feel 50 pairs of eyes staring at me critically. My heart was racing, but I stood up straighter and kept walking into the room, determined not to let their disapproval get to me. Murmurs trailed after me as I moved through the room. "I can't believe she actually dared to come," they seemed to say. "After all the things she's been up to, it's just too much." I overheard someone say they're taking her to court. The space was crowded. Relatives I hadn't seen in ages were everywhere. My father was standing close to the fireplace, in conversation with Uncle Richard, but his expression changed to a scowl when he noticed me. Eliza, always dramatic, was standing near the buffet, completely captivating a cluster of cousins. She looked briefly in my direction, her eyes becoming briefly narrow, and the next second her face changed quickly to pretend sympathy. "Emma," my dad called out, his voice sharp and unwelcoming. "I'm honestly shocked you decided to be here." I plastered on a smile and stayed right where I was standing. Naturally, I came. "It's a gathering for our family, right?" The air was so heavy with unspoken words you could feel it. Eliza casually strolled over, a glass in her hand, her voice full of fake kindness. "It's really bold of you to be here given everything that's been happening," she said with affected sweetness. "I realize you've been going through a tough time recently." My fists were tight at my sides as I held my folder firmly beneath my arm. "You really have no clue, Eliza, and that's precisely why I'm standing here. I've got something I need to get off my chest, and I feel like everyone present has a right to know." Her confident grin wavered just for a moment as the room quieted, and I saw a quick flash of nervousness cross her face. I decided that, for once, I wouldn't let her dictate what was said. I moved ahead, my heart beating so powerfully that I could hardly make out my own thoughts. The room became completely quiet, and all eyes were trained on me. Her arrogant assurance was still evident, but I detected a slight tightening of the muscles around her eyes. I started talking, and despite the rush of adrenaline, my voice remained firm. "I am aware that many of you have been hearing stories about me, stories designed to portray me as a dishonest person and a criminal. It's really been painful for me to imagine that so many of you actually think I'm capable of such actions." I stopped talking for a moment, looking around at everyone, allowing the quiet to grow. "But my intention wasn't to try and convince you of my innocence through simple words. I've brought evidence with me." I retrieved the folder from where I was holding it and displayed it for everyone to see. "I've got proof and confirmation for everything I'm getting ready to present to you. I'm talking bank records, statements from people who saw things, and even audio recordings from the locations these loans were allegedly obtained." A low hum spread throughout the audience, and I flipped open the folder, raising the initial piece of paper, which was a digital copy of the loan request containing Eliza's fake autograph and image. The autograph is clearly not mine. Although the identification shown has my name, the person pictured isn't me. She's the one in the picture. I gestured directly in Eliza's direction. A wave of shocked breaths filled the room, and the self-assured front she was putting on faltered for a split second before she regained her composure. "That's absurd," she exclaimed, her voice getting louder as she chuckled anxiously. "What possible reason could I have for doing something like that? Emma, that's a low blow, even coming from you." But I kept going. I showed everyone all the supporting details, the dissimilar penmanship, the times she was actually present in the towns where the loans were secured, how the staff members described her. Slowly, each element fell into place, and the people in the room shifted their attention to Eliza, their faces transitioning from feeling bad for me to being doubtful of her. When I had concluded, the atmosphere in the room was thick with suspense. I focused my gaze right on my father. His complexion was ashen, and his eyes flicked back and forth between Eliza and me. "Dad," I spoke, lowering the volume of my voice. "I get that it's a hard pill to swallow, but the reality of the situation is staring us right in the face. She actually stole my name and basically my whole persona to pay for the way she lived, and now I'm stuck dealing with the aftermath." Eliza suddenly spoke up, her voice sharp and piercing. "This is totally crazy. She's not telling the truth. She's trying to make everyone hate me because she's always been envious. And you all know she's never been happy for my success." However, the proof I presented was more convincing than anything she could say, and for the first time, I witnessed some uncertainty in the eyes of those who had always sided with her. As I wrapped up my explanation with all my proof laid out for everyone to see, the room became incredibly quiet. The expressions on people's faces, which had been filled with disapproval and criticism, now showed surprise and incredulity, and their eyes went back and forth between me and Eliza with growing suspicion. The rumors began to circulate rapidly, and I could perceive a change in attitude, initially slight, but definitely noticeable. They were actually starting to believe my version of events. The burden of their disapproval finally started to dissipate, replaced by the awful understanding of what Eliza had really done. Eliza's expression became contorted with rage as the murmurs grew louder, the overwhelming proof closing in on her. "This is absurd," she said abruptly, her voice strained and shaky. "I'm not gonna stay here and listen to this garbage." I watched her force her way through the assembled people, the sharp sound of her heels a frantic rhythm against the ground as she rushed toward the exit. Before vanishing into the darkness, she yelled back, saying everyone was foolish for trusting her, leaving an astonished quiet hanging in the air. As soon as Eliza had shut the door with a bang behind her, the room exploded with whispered conversations and unsure attempts to excuse the situation. Some family members came over to me, their voices gentle and full of regret. One of my cousins said she was really sorry, with tears starting to fill her eyes, telling me they had no idea what was happening. But I couldn't bear to stay and hear them. My heart was pounding as I turned around, following the same path Eliza had taken through the crowd. I needed to face her, just the two of us. My dad yelled for me to stop, calling out, "Emma, hold on." I paused briefly, but I kept moving forward. I could hear him running behind me as I walked out into the chilly night, searching the parking area for Eliza. I spotted her right away, struggling with the keys to her car, her hands shaking as she tried to get the lock open. I yelled out, "Eliza," my voice bouncing off the empty cars and buildings. She stopped what she was doing, then turned around to look at me, her face showing a mixture of anger and fear. My dad finally caught up to us, breathing heavily, and he looked back and forth between us, his face showing he was both confused and angry. He asked what in the world was happening, his voice cutting through the strained quiet. I moved closer, staring directly at Eliza. "We're not letting this go. We need to have this conversation immediately." Eliza's gaze flicked back and forth between my father and me, the dread she felt barely hidden under the bold look she was giving us. She folded her arms across her chest, propping herself against the vehicle as if she could create a barrier against what was about to happen. "Just tell him, Eliza," I stated, my tone even but strong. "If you don't confess to Dad about what you've done, then I'm going to have to go to the police." Her jaw clenched tightly, and for a split second I believed she might explode, but she felt the immense pressure of the situation weighing down on her, and she was aware of it. "Eliza," Dad questioned, his voice trembling, overflowing with rage and hopelessness. "Is what Emma is saying actually accurate? Did you honestly do that?" Eliza gave a scornful laugh, rolling her eyes upward. "All right, fine," she retorted, throwing her hands up in the air. "Yeah, I did it, all right." I put her name on the loan applications. It didn't occur to me that things would escalate to this point. I honestly believed that the whole thing would just disappear, and nobody would even notice what happened. Dad took a step backward, his face losing all its color. "How could you do something like this? To your own flesh and blood? To your very own family?" "I didn't expect her to be so dramatic about it," Eliza fired back, her voice wavering a little. "I was hurting for cash, and she's always managed to stay out of the spotlight." The thought had been that she'd just take the consequences and move on with things. I moved my head from side to side, my heart racing in my chest. "You didn't just hurt my feelings, you've ruined my whole existence, but if you just take responsibility and make things right, I was fully prepared to let you get away with it. If you don't resolve those debts and exonerate me, I will guarantee that the authorities and everyone else become aware of your actions." My ultimatum seemed to paralyze Eliza. She was clearly weighed down by it. For what might have been the first time ever, she was speechless, lacking the charisma to talk herself out of this mess. Eliza's resistance seemed to just disappear, and her shoulders slumped as tears started to form in her eyes. She wouldn't make eye contact with either of us and kept looking at the ground. Her voice was so soft I almost couldn't hear her when she murmured, "I'm sorry." I never planned for things to escalate this far. Frankly, I really didn't consider the ramifications of my actions. My dad just looked at her, and it was clear that he was both let down and surprised. "You didn't think?" he asked her. "Eliza, can you actually grasp the amount of damage you've done to your sister, to this family?" She shook her head as she dabbed at her eyes. I'll take care of this, she stated hurriedly, her voice shaky. I'll pay back every cent, I'll settle the accounts, and I'll ensure Emma's name is cleared. I swear I will make amends. I studied her closely, trying to find a hint of manipulation in her expression, but for the first time, Eliza seemed truly remorseful. I stated, you had better be serious, my voice low but firm, because if you aren't, I will proceed with the next course of action. Eliza, this is it, you won't get another opportunity. She nodded her head rapidly. Yes, I get it, I'll get it done, Emma. I swear it. Eliza followed through with what she said during the following weeks. She reached out to the lending institutions, cleared the outstanding debts, and gave me paperwork that demonstrated I wasn't associated in any way. It wasn't a simple journey, and it didn't magically undo the harm immediately, yet little by little, people remembered my good reputation. Though her behavior would always be in my memory, I experienced a feeling of resolution. Ultimately, things worked out fairly, not by seeking payback, but by ensuring responsibility was taken. Eliza's choices definitely left their mark, but they also empowered me to defend myself and get my life back on track. My loved ones started to recognize the real me, not the misrepresented version of me they'd unfairly believed in. Although rebuilding faith with Eliza would be a long road, I was comforted by the fact that I had, at long last, emerged from beneath her influence and was shining on my own.